Thank you, Manthan, for giving me this wonderful opportunity. This is my first public lecture in my hometown. This is my first public lecture in a town that my grandparents on both sides made their home. My parents were raised and grew up, and so that their child could one day have a shot at arguing a case, and now many cases, before the Supreme Court. That is the promise of India, and that is the promise of India's constitution. So today, to all of you, I'm going to talk about some old-fashioned values. Amid this Ghar Vapsi of mine, and those who speak about Ghar Vapsi don't usually talk about the constitution. And those who speak about Ghar Vapsi don't usually talk about wonderful old-fashioned values that the Constitution makes our own: equality, dignity, fraternity, life, liberty, yours and mine. So today, I'm going to talk about this because we are at a very poignant moment in our country's present, future, and past. There are fellow citizens today in the northernmost state of ours who have been disconnected from the rest of us for 58 days and counting. And it is in that context today that we must appreciate our founding, our origins, who we are, and what we were meant to be, and what then we have become. So ladies and gentlemen, India, my constitution's country, today on Bapu's 150th birth anniversary. So I'm going to divide this talk up into 3 parts, right? Because I know I am your pre-lunch speaker, and I have to keep you with me, right? So Act 1, the story of modern India's creation. It's important, and I'll show you why. Act 2, my constitution's country, stories of rights, of liberty, of equality and dignity through a few of my cases and others. And Act 3 is our future, also our past. My friend Srinath Raghavan, a historian who interprets the past, I suspect will see many patterns that will be relevant to our future as well. All right, so let's get started. So the actors in Act 1, you know well: Mr. Nehru, Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Jinnah, Lord Mountbatten, so on and so forth. Birth of India's nationhood. A free country is born on August 15th, 1947. But what else is happening while this new country is being born, and across the border, our co-country, Pakistan, is being born?
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
I think on Bapu's birthday, he would be quite happy with this picture with one of his favorite sons. As India is being created in November 1949, as our president signs in the draft constitution, something else is also happening simultaneously. Borders are being negotiated, and trains are coming in. These trains are going both sides of the border. Some of these trains would leave with alive people, jostling for space, fearful of their future, and some of these trains would cross into these new countries full of dead bodies. We have seen this happen, and as the constitution is being drafted, as India is being created, as Nehru is addressing the country from the ramparts of the Red Fort, this is also happening. This is the old fort. I see it on my drive to court every day. It is in the heart of the city, Purana Killa. It was flooded with refugees coming into the capital, trying to build a life. And this was also happening. As villages and little towns, as neighbors turned on each other. So lest you think of what you see today is a creation of just today, it is a pattern of what has already happened. This turning on each other in the name of religion is something that we did at our founding. And while this turning on each other was happening, we were making a commitment to the future to be a better Indian. And that commitment to a more decent, better Indian was embodied in the Constitution. You've seen these, and this could well be modern-day India as well. There are such pictures, modern-day Uttar Pradesh, modern-day Gujarat. It is not just our past that we are now repeating. It is our future that we are committing to such images. As the Constitution of India would be adopted by a proud Prime Minister and an equally proud chairman of the drafting committee, and we'll come to him, on January 26, 1950, we committed to these core values, these non-negotiable values, these essential values of who we are. And what are those that we recognized? In your dignity lies mine. In your equality lies mine. In your freedom lies mine. And he said, audio please.
Mr. Chairman, therefore, I should have thought that in order to make a start, in order to induce every party, every section in this country, it would be the act of greatest statesmanship for the majority party even to make a concession to the prejudices of people who are not prepared to march together. And it is for that I propose to make this appeal. Let us leave aside slogans. Let us leave aside words which frighten people. Let us even make concession to the prejudices of our opponents. Bring them in so that they may willingly join with us on marching upon that road, which, as I said, if we walk long enough, must necessarily lead us to unity.
Far from giving in to the prejudices of our opponents, far from being statesmanship or statesmanlike, contemporary Indian politics is often at odds with our core values. These core values that Ambedkar crafted so carefully, these core values that Nehru imparted a popular metaphor and a popular political movement to, these core values of equality, dignity, and non-discrimination. The heart of every case that you would put together to put forth in the Supreme Court. These core values which essentially say this, that even though in the past we have not been able to sit together and have a meal, that even though in the past I may not have been able to have access to an education, that even though in the past we were stratified on the basis of caste, creed, religion, and gender, today in this country, after January 26, 1950, these would be our core values. And these values have helped. They have enabled an immense expansion of freedom. Why should each one of you be invested in the Constitution? Because it enables an immense expansion of your own freedom. And therefore, why should you be invested when someone else's freedom contracts in a state that you've never been to and will probably never go to? Because it creates precedent so that in future your freedom will be contracted. And so we did expand freedom. in multiple cases and in a country which is as diverse as this. And these numbers are important because when you want to create national registers, when you want to shut down a state, these are some of the numbers that you have to keep in mind. These numbers of millions are not just numbers of percentages. These numbers of millions are millions of individual citizens who are embodied with those rights that the Constitution gave to us. And we saw in this second act an immense expansion of rights, of privileges, and of fraternity, of being able to learn from each other. Cases like the Right to Education Act, which enabled private schools to be opened up to lower-income children and children who'd been disadvantaged, taught those of privilege what life could also be like. And this is what the act did, and this is what the Supreme Court upheld. The Constitution enabled the expansion of freedom in other cases too. Section 377, all of you know it. This is Navtej Singh Johar. But the main argument that was made in that case was also a quintessential constitutional argument. And that constitutional argument was that this document made sure that we entered into a compact with the state. And that compact of equality, dignity, and fraternity was being violated. In cases like victims of extrajudicial executions versus the Union of India and the state of Manipur, a case which was about the alleged fake encounters of 1,528 people in the state of Manipur, the Supreme Court did this. What is the value of truth? So Justice Lokur says in cases of fake encounters, it is necessary to know the truth so that the law is tempered with justice. The exercise for knowing the truth mandates ascertaining whether fake encounters or extrajudicial killings have taken place, and if so, who are the perpetrators of human rights violations, and how can the next of kin be commiserated with, and what further steps ought to be taken. These are the values of the Constitution being upheld. And this is the expansion of freedom that has been happening. Today in India, you are at a different point. Today in India, and this is a slide from Kashmir, today in India, you are at a point where the northernmost state of this country has had a communications blockade, has had a situation in which people cannot get to hospitals, cannot access schools, cannot access police stations. We have talked about the Constitution and constitutional values of freedom of speech, of expression, of inherent dignity, of the right not to be detained, of the right to have political leaders who we can access, not to have an entire political class under detention. But most significantly, if there is anything inherent in the ability of a free people that defines their freedom, it is the right to habeas corpus. Ambedkar called these writs that you were able to mount against the state, that these writs of habeas corpus, quo warranto, certiorari, these writs would be your check on the executive. Today in India, in 2019, we are at a point where habeas corpus petitions are not being entertained. Your freedom and my freedom is most intimately, intrinsically, immediately protected by the ability of lawyers to be able to file habeas corpus petitions if you are disappeared. The difference between the emergency then in the 70s and what we are in India today. As my senior Ashok Desai told me, in the emergency, you could file a habeas corpus petition and you would be heard within 24 hours. That is not the case today. So as a people, we should all be very fearful of what is happening in India today. Because what is happening is something that Srinath spoke about. What is happening is that a precedent is being created. A legal precedent, a political precedent, And a precedent is being created by the press, which does not question either of this, to ensure that systematically our freedoms will shrink. And that is what sets apart a constitutional democracy from any other kind of country. It is a precedent-based compact with an expansion and protection of freedom. So when someone else's freedom shrinks and that precedent is upheld, it means that yours is threatened as well. We should all be interested, aware of what is happening in India today. Because when you can use president's rule and a presidential ordinance to reorganize a state in the country, it means that any other state can also be reorganized. So much for federalism. Now, on Gandhi's 105th birthday, these are not slides I should put up, but I think Bapu would have wanted us to be cognizant. This is the day that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was shot dead. Now, a nation certainly plunged into mourning. But equally so, there was an entire wave of thought that justified that killing. It was not the ideology of one man. It was the ideology of a movement. And today in India, given that we, the people, committed to a compact of recognizing each other's inherent freedom, dignity, and rights to non-discrimination, given that that is the commitment we all made in 1950, and that is the commitment that we make to each other on a daily basis, we must ask ourselves a very clear question. And I don't need 40 minutes to make this point, because this is the only question I came to make today. The question we need to ask ourselves is this: the ideology that assassinated Bapu, are we rid of it, or has it expanded? The ideology that needed to kill Mohandas, is it in power, or are we done with it? The ideology that destroyed the man who preached nonviolent change in this country, would it be happy with these constitutional values of equality, dignity, and non-discrimination? And if we, as a people, will make a compact with that ideology, then what will remain of not just Gandhi's idea of India, but also the Constitution's idea of India? And I would love to take your questions. Thanks for your question.
I'm Mirza Abdullah Ali Beg, and my question to you is the kind of pattern that is emerging since morning is that we need to bring change in polity. And when I say that, can we make our political system more accountable for what they are doing to us and what they are doing to the country and the whole fabric of the nation?
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good question, and thank you for that. I guess part of my answer to your question is, how have we fueled this kind of politics? And why do we not have better, not just a political class, but why do we not expect a better political class with more apt constitutional values? I think that's the question. How have we let this happen? Because this is not a one-way process of a political class that rises in isolation from a people.
I'm Lieutenant General P.R. Kumar.
Nice to meet you, sir. Welcome to my
I retired as the Director General of Military Operations 3 years ago.
Your question, just the question.
I have nothing to say against the earlier two talks, but I want to just make 3 points. Give me one, not even 1 minute. First, there is a big difference between history and real politics.
Sir, I'm sorry. Just please come to your question.
Yeah.
We don't have time.
I'm Yasmin Lodi. My question is regarding the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know, the problem we seem to have, some of the weaknesses in our Constitution would you say the lack of due process of law being included in the Constitution is a problem? And the second one is, we don't have something like the Fifth Amendment, which will protect us from incriminating ourselves. And this allows the government to hold people as long as they want, just to investigate whether they have their...
I think you got the question. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, but I think two things. One, the Constitution explicitly provides for procedure established by laws, that your freedom, your detention cannot be, your freedom cannot be taken away without procedure established by law being followed. That includes the Code of Criminal Procedure, that includes the Indian Penal Code, and that includes constitutional protections like fundamental rights, right? Secondly, you do have an absolute right not to incriminate yourself. So the general kind of myth and the general argument that we hear in the court system today that, we need him for more questioning because, he's not incriminating himself, you have a right not to incriminate yourself, right? That is protected explicitly by the Constitution.
The girl here in the red?
Yeah.
Yes, quickly.
Thank you. Ma'am, my question is, how do we make the Constitution a matter of personal concern for people? Something that goes out of just a textbook and into the public consciousness and into the imagination of people when they discuss issues.
No, I think that's a very, very good question, and really that's why I'm here. I mean, part of the problem is we talk about the Constitution only in English. Right? This is really the first part of the problem. The language of the court is English. We write in English. I argue in English. And we have ceded that entire space out there, which is the vernacular press, and not just Hindi, other languages also. And the problem really is the English-speaking constituency is a small constituency. And my colleagues and I will be writing op-eds and so on and so forth to this small constituency. But हम हिंदी में बात ही नहीं करते हैं, हम हिंदी में लिखते नहीं, हिंदी में कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को संविधान कहते हैं, संविधान. When you think of the difference in expression in these languages, right? When you think of the space that we have ceded so that a politics of opposition to constitutional values has taken root in our political culture, we have ceded this space. हम अपनी भाषाएं में engage ही नहीं करते हैं संविधान के बारे में. Nehru's speech, The Tryst with Destiny, which you heard, there is a Hindi speech as well. And in that Hindi speech, he talks about rivers of blood that flowed in partition. अंग्रेजी में इसकी कोई चर्चा ही नहीं है, और अंग्रेजी में जब हमें संविधान के बारे में बताया जाता है तो इसकी कोई वार्तालाप, इसकी कोई डिस्कशन होती नहीं है. जब हमारा संविधान बन रहा था तो तब इस देश में खून बह रहा था, और अब भी इस देश में खून बह रहा है.
मेनिका, थैंक्स. हिंदी में आपने बात किया, मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा. क्या आपके पास अपने संविधान का हिंदी रूपांतर है? क्या आप उसे पढ़ सकती हैं?
जी, फिर से बताइए.
अपने संविधान, do you have the Hindi translation of the Constitution here, and can you read it out for the all of us?
I'm not carrying it with me, but it's available online.
That would help.
And you should
As a
all
start.
access it. And this is the other part of the project, right? We should be able to do this in Telugu.
True.
We should be able to do
Every
this in
vernacular.
Tamil. We should be able to do this in Gujarati, in Kashmiri, in Bengali. The project of keeping the Constitution alive is as much about litigation as much as it is about communication. And today, the litigation part of the project is a lesser project. It is the communication part of the project that is your responsibility.
Hi, Menaka. This is Far. Here.
Sir, I can't see you.
Yeah. Menaka here. Can you see here?
Yes, I can.
Here. On the left-hand side.
Yes, please go ahead.
I can see you.
Yeah,
Please.
hi. Here. Hi, Menaka.
Oh, hi.
May I ask the volunteers not to hand over the mic unless you are
my
told,
question
please?
is,
This creates confusion.
Yeah, my name is Farooqi and I'm company secretary by profession. you talked about constitution, right? I really appreciate you for that. So my straight question is that the current Home Minister of India recently had gave a statement that he'll give an asylum to people like people from Hindu community, Sikh community, Christians. So what is he going to do for the other communities? Nothing but straightforward to the Muslims. So why don't you file a writ petition against him? Is he above the law, or is he also same before
We got
the
it.
law?
Thank you.
You know, I cannot speculate what the Home Minister is thinking, but I do think this, that, you know, when cabinet ministers occupy positions, then I think their statements have to comport with constitutional values. So I, as a senior advocate, am not allowed under the Advocates Act to file a writ, but you know what? Each of you is a constitutional warrior, and each of you can approach your courts.
Is the judiciary in the country really independent, and is it able to resist political pressure?
I suspect that all of you have an opinion. I could be wrong. I believe, as a lawyer, that it is my job to take stories from my country to court. And I hope every day that I will get a fair hearing. Now, I do not want to write off any institution, because if I write off any institution, then I write off the interpreters of the Constitution. So, I say this to myself every day: I believe. I believe that this is possible. I have that faith. It is your job to ask questions of the institutions you engage with, whether it's the press, whether it's management committees in your schools, whether it is your newspapers, and there are many high functionaries from newspapers here. It is your job to ask those questions. My workspace is the courtroom. I ask those questions. The question is simply this today: are you asking those questions? So, inasmuch as there are concerns about every single institution, I will go back to the talk before me. Why are not each of you, if you are troubled by it, why are not each of you standing up and being counted? Today, on Bapu's birth anniversary, that is what he would expect of you. Today, as the Indian Constitution crosses 70 years, that is what Ambedkar would expect of you, to stand up and be counted. And today, irrespective of which party you vote for, which caste you belong to, which religion you belong to, each of the movements that have created freedom for us have done so by standing up and being counted. How have we become a country where not many of us are willing to stand up anymore?